Hi, my name is Jason Sulliman, and I wanted to share some information I've learned about timing, especially as it relates to musicians who want to play better in time. There's been a fair amount of research that's been done in hard science fields, and patient groups that have been examined include Parkinsonian patients, people with ADD or ADHD, people with Alzheimer's, people with dementia, as well as professionally and pre-professional musicians. Those groups have all been tested for timing. And the basic way, the most popular way that people get tested for timing is they do something called a synchronization continuation task. And that's where there'll be some kind of metronome, some kind of stimulus, external stimulus, and then you'll have to tap some kind of device along with the time. And then at some point, the stimulus goes away, and you have to keep tapping at the same rate. That's the most common paradigm that's been examined, and then from there's all sorts of little variables that have been changed along the way. But there's been some really interesting fMRI research, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and that's where they basically try to see what regions of the brain are activated when we do things. There's been a couple of studies out there that are really fascinating that are starting to show that the synchronization part of the task, when there is an external source of stimuli and you synchronize to it, that seems to be activating certain regions of the brain. But then when that external source goes away, and then we just maintain tempo on our own independently, different regions of the brain are activated. And that's a really important concept for anyone that is trying to better themselves in terms of their timing, or if you're a band director, an orchestra director, and you want your ensemble to have better time. How are the individuals approaching timing in the ensemble? If they're just listening to the people around them, that's like a synchronization task, and that's using certain regions of the brain. But if we need them to keep good time for themselves, we want them to be counting, we want them to have that internal source of pulse, that's actually more like a continuation task. There's not a lot of resources that allow us to bridge the gap between the two. The metronome's either on or the metronome is off. At this point in my career, I feel strongly that using a metronome is, of course, a crucial component of developing great musical habits. However, a metronome, I think, is more of a crutch because it provides too much information. It's too much like that synchronization task, and it's only accessing certain regions of the brain, which are, yes, helpful, but it's not the same as developing the ability to independently keep good time. It's a crutch that we can rely on. And if we start training our young people by, relying on that crutch, then that's only going to create the habit of needing the crutch in the first place. And you'll have an ensemble full of members that's listening to one another, and nobody's driving the bus in terms of time. So we want to help instill a habit of trying to make good time. And I really felt that there really weren't any resources available, so I made one. So here's a little bit about the resource that I created to help musicians out to bridge this gap between having that external source of stimulus but too much and it's a crutch versus having nothing to use because that presents its own problems. I published an album on CD Baby called Innovative Practice Tools, Random Metronome, and it's also, you can find it on iTunes. I'll put links, all over I'll put a link somewhere up there. You can go to my website, www.jasonsulliman.com, and then if you go to the page for Innovative Practice Tools, you can find information that explains it as well. And then there are links at that point to go on to iTunes. This is an example of 120 beats a minute. What I did was I put different tempi, all 5-beat increments, so 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, etc., all the way up to 250, I think it was. And each track has the first 4 beats as audible. After that point, some of the beats have been randomly silenced, so the overall temporal structure is the same, but with some of those beats silent, the individual has to maintain an independent sense of pulse to line up with the metronome. And this is entirely different from using the metronome as a crutch and just playing along with it. So I feel like it really helps me develop a good sense of time internally. And I'll just give an example of some different ways that I might use this. So there's the time. And then some beats are missing. So if I were to do a synchronization task, the level of independent timekeeping I have to employ to do this is a little higher than if the metronome were providing all of the information. So here's a way that I would practice with it. I mean, you can play anything you want, scales, arpeggios, etudes, orchestral excerpts, solo rep, anything you like. example. Now here's another thing you can do. This is 120 beats a minute, but let's say I get to the point where I feel pretty proficient on those first 5 notes of the B-flat scale, so I'm going to put up a different track. 60 beats a minute. And I'm going to play the same thing, but now there are more beats that are removed. And it makes it a little bit harder because there's less information that's being provided. Here's another way you can practice with these metronome tracks. If you really want to kick up the challenge meter, try to put the metronome track on as the upbeat. Totally changes the game. It's really hard. I can feel my brain really working to keep good time there. Now, let's take the 60 beats a minute, so half of the beats are presented, and some of those are randomly removed, and let's make those the upbeats. Really hard to do, but you know that you've got good time if you're doing that. So these metronome tracks can be used pretty much the same way you practice right now with a metronome. You can just use these to substitute that other source of stimulus that you have. Metronomes providing all the information, no metronomes providing none of the information. Neither of those answers I'm really thrilled with. I think where we need to be is somewhere in the middle, and so I try to create that randomized wonderland in the middle with this resource. So download a track. One track costs $1. The album I think costs $10. Download it and try it out. Let me know what you think. You can feel free to leave comments. I hope this is helpful for you, and it's about time. Thanks.